Page 227.
Thank you very much. 227 was where we left off yesterday.
Before Pesach even starts?
That's it. We started on Rosh Chodesh. This is the yeshiva custom. It may be a relic, but
You guys have a whole month off or no?
we had a whole extra month this year, more than most winter zman.
Right, because
So
it's
it's the second Adar.
I'm saying, you guys will be having a month off?
That's correct. From Rosh Chodesh to Rosh Chodesh. Rosh Chodesh Nisan to Rosh Chodesh Iyar.
That's great timing for me.
You're leaving to America, I understand, yeah. Right. Okay. So let's go back to this Leil HaSeder. We talked about reclining and the mitzvah of Kadesh. Page 227, yeah. And the reclining. While you drink the cup, you have to recline at these critical points. Seven places in the Haggadah that you have to recline, or you don't fulfill your obligation, right? We said that
4 times.
7 times.
4 glasses of
When
wine.
4 glasses of wine,
Oh, yeah, right.
and
Sorry, yes, right.
what else?
Matzah.
Matzah.
Korech
Korech, good. That's the common custom. And
and kapash.
nope. Nope, because
The
that's
story.
nope. You could, but you know. The other mitzvah, eating. We eat the matzah. That's the mitzvah. So we have to lean comfortably. And we eat the matzah twice. Second time, at the end of the meal. The Afrikaam, it's commonly known.
Right.
During the Afrikaam, you should be reclining as well. And then the 4 cups, good morning. The 4 cups, and we said it's complicated if you miss it. If you miss reclining, if you forget, you have to redo it. But it's problematic to redo the first, the third, and the 4th cup, because it appears like you're adding an additional cup. The 2nd cup you can repeat, no problem, because it's the meal. Yeah, it's time for the meal. You can have as many cups of wine as you want. Now, the other question that we're going to deal with today is, so you make kiddush, and we looked a little bit at the grand scheme of things. It takes a long time till we eat, until we drink. After kiddush, usually we're used to having food. What do we have? Kadesh or chat karpas. We have a little bit of vegetables. We'll see why, just a little bit. And then you start the magid. The magid, that's the longest part of the Seder. The magid, that's the section where we tell the story in many different ways, as we were going to see and we talked about already. You might get hungry. What are you going to do? You might get thirsty. I mean, you're sitting around, you're having a good time, you're reclining, you're in your finest dishes, and you're starving. And you're thirsting. You can't have a sandwich. You can't have a beer, right? What do you do? What do you do? So this is a good question that we're going to deal with right now. Okay, are you allowed to eat in between or drink in between the various stages? You know, obviously after the 2nd cup, it's the meal, so you can have anything you want. And then after the meal, you really can't have anything you want, because after the Afrikaam, you're not supposed to eat other things. But before the meal starts, that's the question. During the magid and drinking in between the 1st and the 2nd cup, are you allowed to? The 2nd cup comes at the end of the magid. 2nd cup comes as a conclusion. You basically, there's this, when you make kiddush, what do? You hold up the cup, right? And you say, right? And then you say, whatever you say, and then you say, you finish. Why are you holding the cup for the whole time? Because the idea is that you're saying the words on the cup. It's called the cup kosel bracha. We said that there's rules about it. It was the bracha sort of said, with the cup of wine in hand. It's related to the cup, so the cup gives it gravitas, gives it importance. The statements that you're saying. Also, birkat hamazon. Have you ever seen somebody do birkat hamazon with a cup of wine in his hand? You hold it for the whole time, at least till the 4 brachos are finished, and then you can set it down until you finally finish all the harachmans, and then you say the boy pregafen. So each one of these mitzvah performances that are associated with the cup, you should be holding the cup. So for Kiddush, so we hold the cup for the whole Kiddush. Finish, you drink the first cup. Third, I said, birkat hamazon, you're holding it the whole time. You finish, you drink it. The 4th cup and the 2nd cup is where it gets a little bit difficult. The 4th cup is the Hallel. It's a little bit long and you're singing and that. Can you really hold it the whole time? Maybe you should, but it's hard. But the 2nd cup, the longest section, 2 hours? You can hold a pure cup for 2 hours? How can you put on a play about Paro in Egypt and the 10 plagues while you're holding a cup of wine? So you can't. You pour it at the beginning, and it's there. Maybe there's a few times during the Haggadah that we're told to lift it up, put it down again. We can't really be lifting it up. Why? What did we say? You have to be telling the Haggadah not only on the cup of wine, you have to be telling the Haggadah on the matzah. The matzah is called lechem oni, lechem she'onina al dvarim habeh, a bread that people speak about a lot. So you're speaking about the bread. Ultimately, at the end, you're going to eat the bread, special bread, right? So you're supposed to be telling the story on the bread and on the cup of wine, which we talked about the sport. You can't have one at the same time as the other. So we cover up the challahs when we lift up the wine. Put down the wine, we uncover the challahs, right? So we're always going back and forth. But essentially, the concept that you have to understand is that the 2nd cup is poured right after the 1st cup, because then the entire Magid, the entire story is told while the 2nd cup is there. It's sort of like on the 2nd cup, like Kiddush. You say all the Vayichulu Hashemayim with holding the Kiddush cup. So we're not going to hold the cup the entire time because it's really impractical and it's contradictory with the matzah. But when you finish telling the story, you make the bracha. That's when you drink the 2nd cup. The 2nd cup basically is about the story, or it gives gravitas to the telling of the story. So during that entire period of the Magid, are you allowed to drink anything else? Are you allowed to eat anything else? This is what we're going to deal with today. Okay, yes, Moshe.
I had, I'm not going to say it was an argument, I had a discourse about birkat hamazon.
Argument is fine. It's just say machloket.
There was a machlokes, and as to whether saying Rub-a-dub-dub, thanks for the grub, Hashem, you're awesome, makes you Yotzi for birkat hamazon in a technical sense.
Doraita, you're probably Yotze. From the biblical command, you're probably Yotze.
Okay.
But you're not doing it right according to the rabbis.
Okay.
That's a bad thing.
So we were both wrong.
Okay, what is it? I don't know, whatever.
He said, no, it's not even, you don't even, he said you don't even
fulfill the biblical commandment, yeah.
And I said, no, it's okay.
The Gemara says that there's a story like that. Right. No, it's the right okay and rabbinic not. Okay. All right, let's go. Page 227. Thomas, take it away, please. Yeah. Number 13 in chapter 16.
May one drink after the first cup? Technically, one wish to drink after the first of the 4 cups may do so, but one should preferably not drink between the first and 2nd cups, so that it does not become intoxicated to the point of being unable to read the Haggadah with proper concentration. However, it's permissible to drink non-alcoholic beverages, such as grape juice or any other juice.
By the way, in the day, there's a whole discussion in the Talmud, are you allowed to drink? Because the assumption was when you drink wine. And I think for many years, they didn't really drink water. The water was hard to come by. In some eras, the water was unclean, and wine was just healthier. And so if you're going to drink something, you're going to drink wine. So nowadays, we drink wine only for the special occasions, for the or when we want to drink wine for the special beverage that it is. But So that's what the original halacha was talking about. Are you allowed to drink anything in between, any more wine between the first cup and the second cup? And the answer is, what's the answer? No, because we want you to be able to tell the story. We don't want you to get too drunk. It's enough you're going to drink 4 cups of wine in one night. Yeah, to have 4 cups more than that. So, but what if you're thirsty? Have another drink. There's no problem. If drinking water, juice, Coke, it's poison. But there's no problem drinking other beverages. Do you say a bracha? So a lot of people don't realize this. The whole year long, this is not a halacha about Pesach, but the whole year long, if you, for example, a kiddush. Sometimes Shabbos morning people have kiddush after davening, and they have a cup of wine, and they say the kiddush on the cup of wine. And then they have, you have to have some mezonot to make kiddush b'makom suda. You have to have some pastry or some pretzels, whatever it is you like, and then you wanted to have a soft drink, or cold water, or milk, or coffee. If you want to have coffee, if you didn't have coffee in the morning. If you just said the kiddush on the wine, the bracha on the wine covers all the other drinks. It's like hamotzi. The bracha on the bread covers all the other foods that you're going to eat in the meal. Well, after you say hamotzi, you don't say bar pri adama and bar pri eitz and all those other things. And bar yamin mezonot. If you have them in the meal, it's all covered in the meal. Same thing with the bar pri gafen. But you have to have in mind. You have to have in mind that your bar pri gafen is going to cover all the other drinks. So you can do that, and then you're good. But only for liquids, for drinks, not for foods. If you have another food, you have to make a bracha on it, and we'll see about that in just a minute. So Thomas, go ahead.
While reciting the blessing over the wine, one had in mind to drink other beverages, he needed not recite the bracha over them, because the bracha over wine covers all beverages. Even if he did not intend to drink other beverages, but they were on the table, there was a chance that he might want to drink them. He need not to recite a bracha before drinking them, because the blessing over wine covers these two. Firstborn who fasted on Erev Pesach, or someone so hungry that he finds it difficult to concentrate on reciting the Haggadah, may eat food such as eggs, fruits, potatoes, and kitniot, for those who eat kitniot on Pesach after Kiddush. However, he should not eat too much, so that he saves his appetite for the matzah. For the mirth is only permitted when there is a great need. If one can restrain himself, it's best not to eat anything before the meal, because when one eats after Kiddush, he runs into the problem of whether he has to recite the bracha or not, and if one eats, he must recite bracha or not.
Interesting. So I told you about my custom that I give out chocolate chips to anybody that has a good question. Anybody that asks a question gets a chocolate chip. So perhaps it's not ideal because, the question is, do you say a bracha achrona afterwards? Here, Rav Melamed says you do. If you do eat, you should have a bracha achrona before you eat the meal, because it's not considered to be part of the meal, but it's actually a machloket. And my practice has been to not recite a bracha achrona, because I sort of usually connect up the eating, and also not, even if I have a chocolate chip or two, there's not a shiur. There's not necessarily enough of a kazait that requires you to say a bracha achrona. Depends how many questions you have, right? And how big the chocolate chips are. But in any case, it's clear that you are allowed to eat other foods. And I know families of great rabbis who encourage this custom. Why? Because they say to themselves, what's more important? What's more important? That I should be machmir on this because of the suffix, do I say a bracha achrona or not? Or do I want all my children and all my guests to not be looking at their clock and saying, when do we eat? Mm-hmm. At the classic question. Enough with all these stories and games and plays and little ideas that you want to share. I'm hungry. So many people, they rush through the story part because they're hungry. And that's a shame. As I said, it's one of the mitzvot d'oraita of the night to eat the matzah and to tell the story. So better to enhance the telling of the story by calming people's bellies and have some sweets. Fine, you're not going to have the matzah yet, and you're not going to have any chametz, but you can have anything else. You can have, we're going to talk about the karpas in a minute, you can have some more of that vegetables, or you could have fruits. So some people, a great rabbi I know, he says, they cut up fruit, a fruit platter, and they pass it around. Whoever wants, whoever's hungry has some more fruit. And that's not part of the Seder, but it helps people be awake and not and present. Potatoes, we said, so we're going to see some people actually use potatoes for karpas. That was my family's custom. So in recent years, what we've decided to do is for karpas, we actually have potato fries, French fries. You know what they're called here? In Israel, they're called chips. So we have French fries, and you dip them in salt water. It's delicious.
Freedom fries.
Freedom fries, exactly, not French. But that's all bar pre'adama. You can do that. The question becomes if you eat a lot, and my kids always eat a lot of French fries. So then that becomes a question: do you make a bracha or not? We'll leave that for the footnote for a later discussion. But here he says very clearly you can have eggs, fruits, potatoes, or kidneyot. Well, we don't have kidneyot, but we're Ashkenazi. But as long as you have an appetite for the matzah, you can eat more. Yes.
I have a question. Sometimes children and also older people, they behave not the right way.
Mm-hmm.
Just suppose at that moment, children or older people, they see the matzah, they are very hungry, and take a piece of the matzah. How we need to react?
Yeah, so we could stone them, but then that would be messy, right? And not a good thing. It's never a good thing to get angry.
Right.
So we have to control our anger.
But it's asur to do it.
There are lots of people that do asur things. We can't control them. We can't. If we're going to get angry every time somebody does something asur, we're going to be angry people our whole lives, because it's a demanding religion. And yeah.
It's asur to embarrass someone as well.
Also, it's also true. Maybe people don't know don't know any better, especially young children. They don't know. They're not doing it. They're doing what they should be doing. You have to do what you should be doing, and that should be showing them grace and kindness and compassion, and distract them. Show them other foods that they are allowed to eat, so that they don't have to take the foods that they shouldn't be eating. And tell them, wait, the matzah's special. It's coming later. I got to tell you a story about the matzah first, before you can eat it. But in the meantime, have a little candy, have a little fruit, have things like that. As we take a look at the top of page 229, he changes it a little bit. He limits it a little bit. Go ahead, Thomas. This eating and drinking.
Eating and drinking is only permissible before one prayers the second cap and begins reciting the Haggadah. However, after beginning the Haggadah, it's forbidden to interrupt by eating or drinking. For reciting the Haggadah is like prayer, which cannot be interrupted. Based on Ramban and Aran, however, it's not that Amaora and Tosafot.
So here we have another problem with eating, like I was describing, giving out the chocolate chips throughout the entire Magid section. We said, really, you should be holding the cup for the entire Magid section, or holding the matzah for the entire section. This is an important mitzvah to tell the story. So you're going to just interrupt it by casually having chocolate chips. So it's a machloket, and that's why he says it's not allowed, according to the Biur Halacha. That's the BHL. But there are other Rishonim who permit it, and I think I'm not alone among rabbis that of our generation that say eating during the midst of telling the story might actually enhance your mitzvah, the mitzvah d'oraita of telling the story, and therefore it's not something that's an interruption of the mitzvah, but it's something that's enhancing the mitzvah. It's something that's aiding the mitzvah. It's actually part of the telling of the story. So there is room to be lenient and to have food and drink, as long as it's not wine, because that'll be confusing with the number. Got to stick with the number 4. Don't have another glass of wine, even though you can finish the first one. But usually you pour and fill up the second cup right away, so that you can't partake of it until you make the bracha on it at the end. So you're really not having any wine, which is just fine, because you'll be awake and
Concentrate.
to concentrate on telling the story in the most creative way possible. Okay, so far so good. Good morning. Good morning. Yes. Okay, let's continue to urchatz. Kadesh urchatz. Oh, wow, we know the word rachatz. Modern Hebrew.
No.
What is rachatz? It's okay. What is rachatz? Lirchot. Lirchot. Rechitza. Lirchot. To shower. That's right. To wash yourself. To clean yourself. Rechitza is to wash. So we're so used to the terms of the bracha when we wash our hands before bread. What's the bracha? We say al netilat yadayim. Netilam actually doesn't mean, we don't say to wash your hands. Lechotz yadayim. We say netilat yadayim means to lift up your hands. That's why some people have the custom to lift up their hands. I don't know if you see that. After they pour the water on, they lift them up. Because the language of the bracha is actually about lifting of the hands. But it's a euphemism. It's a special word used for the ritual washing of the hands. But actually the word to wash is lirchot. So here we say kadesh urchatz. Urchatz is when we wash our hands. Why are we washing our hands? Let's read it inside and we'll see. Ariel's here. We can start. Good morning.
Thank you.
Baruch Hashem. Okay, Moshe, take it away. Number 14.
Number 14. Rachatz. After Kiddush, we eat the karpas, a vegetable. The sages ordained eating karpas to create a change that will cause the children to ask, why is that tonight? Unlike all other nights, we are eating a vegetable before the meal. Another reason given for this is that 3 people generally begin their meals with a vegetable appetizer, and so we do the same at the beginning of the Seder. The sages ordained dipping the vegetable in a liquid, because this necessitates washing the hands before eating it, which is also a departure from the usual order of things. Ordinarily, the hands are washed only once at the beginning of the meal before eating bread. Thereafter, excuse me, a variety of other foods are eaten. However, even if we dip these other foods in liquids, it is not necessary to wash our hands a second time, because hand washing for bread covers the whole meal. At the Seder, though, we wash once before eating the karpas and a second time after reciting the Haggadah, before eating the matzah. The children therefore ask, why is this night different that, unlike all other nights, on this night we wash our hands twice? In addition, dipping the vegetable in liquid gives expression to our freedom, because this is the best way to eat it. Not only does it serve as an appetizer, we even hamper ourselves by dipping it in salt water or vinegar, which enhances flavor and stimulates the appetite. A full explanation of this law lies beyond the scope of this book, but suffice it to say that liquids conduct impurity, tuma, more effectively than solid foods. The sages therefore ordain the washing of the hands before eating a food that has been dipped in liquid. According to most Rishonim, the hand washing has the same status as hand washing before eating bread. Both are instituted to avoid tuma. Even though nowadays we do not observe the laws of ritual purity and impurity, the institution remains in force. Thus, just as one must recite the bracha of Al Netilas Yadayim over the hand washing before bread, so must one recite this blessing before eating a food dipped in liquid. This is the opinion of Rambam and Rosh. However, according to Rav Meir of Weinberg, Itur, and Tosafot, there is a difference between these two types of hand washing. Netilas Yadayim before bread was instituted for purposes of sanctity and cleanliness, and thus even today hands should be washed for cleanliness before a meal. Consequently, this hand washing requires a bracha. However, Netilas Yadayim before eating a food dipped in liquid is only due to tuma, and since these laws are not practiced nowadays, there is no need to wash hands before eating a food dipped in liquid. In practice, we wash our hands before eating karpas, but do not recite a blessing in order to fulfill all opinions. On the one hand, we wash our hands in accordance with the poskim who require it, but on the other hand, we do not recite a bracha because there are those who maintain that nowadays there is no need to wash hands before eating food dipped in liquid. If one mistakenly recites a blessing over this hand washing, he is not guilty of a bracha levatala, a blessing in vain, since he has acted in accordance with the majority of poskim, including Levush and Gra, who require a bracha when washing hands for a food dipped in liquid. However, lechatchila ruling is not to recite a bracha because we rule leniently in cases of uncertainty about brachas. Furthermore, if one mistakenly recites a bracha over the first hand washing, this does not exempt him from the second hand washing, and he must recite a blessing over it as well. This is because people are not meticulous about keeping their hands clean between the two washings. In addition, the time spent reciting the Haggadah constitutes an interruption between the two hand washings, and therefore the sages ordained washing hands twice at the Seder.
Has anybody heard of the term davar shetibulo b'mashke? That is the Hebrew for the halacha we just learned about. Something that is dipped in liquid. Davar shetibulo tibul, like latbil, like in a mikvah, tvila. Davar shetibulo b'mashke. Mashke is a liquid, a drink. Anything that's dipped in a drink, there's a machloket about whether or not you have to do al netilat yadayim first. So when you have your cereal and milk, you take your wafer and you dip it in your tea all year round. It's nothing to do with Pesach. You should do netilat yadayim first. There is a comment. So this is an ancient law which has to do with tuma and tahara, and just like we preserve some elements, like washing before bread has something to do with tuma and tahara, so too washing before you put you eat partake of a food which is dipped in liquid. So really, you should wash your hands before you have cereal and milk. Common custom is not to, because we use a spoon usually. We don't touch the food. And what about if you put a wafer in your tea?
Right.
To tell you the truth, the common custom is to not do netilat yadayim for that either, but maybe you should. Maybe you should. Some people even say you should say a bracha. Never heard of this before. You've heard about it because you do it every year at the Seder.
Right.
But people think, oh, this is something special to Seder. The truth is, what's special about the Seder is that we're having vegetables before hamotzi. Right. You do kiddush. Right away you go to hamotzi. This. Why is this night different? We want the children to ask questions. But the very fact that we have to wash before we put the celery or whatever the karpas is in the salt water, that's actually a year-round halacha, which many people are lenient about because they say we don't do that anymore. But on the books, it seems to be more of an obligation. And somebody who wants to rely on that custom won't be alone. There are some people say that our custom is we don't do it, but so it's quite flexible. So even if you say a bracha, it's not considered a bracha levatala because many people say you have to do netilat yadayim like before bread, anytime before you dip your food in a liquid. Okay, cereal and milk maybe not because you're not actually touching the food, but any other food you should be. You have a fruit, you wash off a fruit, you rinse it off because that's what you're supposed to do, right? To keep it clean.
Yeah.
Then you dry.
So then, if it's not dry, if it's still wet, you should do netilat yadayim, davar shetibulo mashke, something that was dipped in water. There is room to say the custom is not to do this type of netilah, but the simplest thing is to dry it off. Dry it off before you eat it, and then you just make a bar praetz, and you don't have to wash netilat
It
yadayim.
sounds even more confusing because back then the water was not as easy to be found than how it is now.
Right.
Now you just open the sink, you have water, but there you had to schlep your water. And
So you say we should be machmir because we have such an abundance of waters. It's easy to do this law.
No,
Following the logic along, Natan.
it's weird that this custom applied back then.
Yeah, can you imagine? That's right. Yeah. Okay, Thomas, you've been waiting to ask a
No,
question.
my question was about the fruit that you rinsed before.
Yes, and
So my question is that the rule is about if the food is wet,
that's correct.
then we need to do.
That's right. No, I would netilah.
Netilah.
Netilah. Yeah.
That means that. Okay, when I wash my fruit, I need to dry it. Then
Correct.
Put it on the table.
That's
then
best.
We don't do a netilah.
If your food is dry when you're about to eat it, then it's fine.
But when I
Yeah.
do the karpas and I put it,
Then it's wet, right? So it's wet.
But it's wet for the taste or it's wet for the cleaning? Is there a difference?
No, it's wet because, and you're going to eat it while it's wet. The point is that you're eating it while it's wet. It's because it has
That's
the,
the whole idea.
yeah. And
If
so
I
we do
put-
netilat yadayim
If
first.
I put the lechem in the coffee and I eat it like this, that's not the
Well, you did netilat yadayim on lechem,
before. Yeah.
so that's fine.
But
It covers.
then I
It
did
covers
for
it. That's
coffee.
fine. It's covered. The netilat yadayim you did for the lechem covers the bread and the if you're dipping, putting your bread into the soup or whatever it is, that's fine.
Not
Doesn't
the
make
food
it
is
makes
wet
sense, but
and
what?
your food is wet and your hands are wet, as in like
No, you dry them off.
to dry your food off.
So you can either one, but if it's wet, you're going to get into problems. The laws of Tuma Tara, they said wetness conducts Tuma, the ritual impurity. Whereas if it's dry, there's no conducting liquid, so there's no problem. But for bread, we're machmir. Even if it's not wet, and the bread is never going to be wet because it's disgusting if it's wet. Even if the bread is dry, we have to wash our hands first. right? There's two separate laws. One is washing for bread, and one is washing for liquids that have been dipped. Yes, another question, Amos.
In connection with this, if I put the water on my grape,
Yes.
then I never dry out. That means that I should do the netilat.
Yeah.
That
Yeah. Ideally. Yeah. Without a bracha. Yeah. That's
without a bracha.
Without a bracha. What
Okay.
netilat yadayim? Yeah. Yeah. With a cup. Two.
Yeah.
Twice in each hand. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. Anyways, this is you learn something new every day. Davar shetibulo b'mashkeh, something which is dipped in liquid, requires netilat yadayim, without a bracha. And sometimes you're so used to making a bracha, it slips out. So he says, nah, not the end of the world. Okay? Because some people say you have to make a bracha anyway, so it's all right. Why are we dipping? What food are we dipping? The karpas. The karpas. Amos, we read for us on page 231 about the karpas?
231?
Yes. 231. Number 15.
Yeah. As you know, the sages ordained eating vegetable, keep it in liquid between Kiddush and the recitation of Haggadah in order to change routine. All year long, we eat vegetable during the meal after washing the hands over bread, but at the Seder, we eat a bit of vegetable before reciting the Haggadah and before washing hands for the meal. Two things are unusual about this. First, we eat vegetable before the meal, and second, we wash our hands twice instead of once. Rashi and Rashbam on Pesachim, the numbers.
114a.
114a, paragraph 473. In addition, because we eat a vegetable before reciting the Haggadah, our Seder meal is imbued with added importance because the finest banquets generally begin with the appetizer and hors
d'oeuvres.
It's French.
Okay.
It's French. Means appetizer. Yeah, go ahead. Followed by
a pause for different parts of the program after which the main meal begins, based on Bach.
It's one of the commentaries on the Shulchan Aruch. It's on the tour. Actually, it explains the point of this custom of having this vegetable. It's to make it a 5-course meal, not just a 2-course meal. It's fancier, and this is the way a big meal is usually done. You have speeches in between.
The word karpas appears neither in the Mishnah nor in the Talmud. We are only told that vegetable is eaten before the Haggadah is recited. Pesachim 114, 115 but a few Rishonim, Maharal, Rabban, write the karpas should be used because its Hebrew name alludes to the 600,000 men put to hard labor in Egypt. The Hebrew letters of the word karpas can be rearranged to spell somech perach. The letter somech has a numerical value of 60 or 600,000, and perach means hard labor. So, not mandatory. The Achoranim say that it's good to use karpas. However, there are different opinions about what karpas is. Some say it is celery, and this is the widespread custom among Sephardim. Others say it is parsley, which is the custom of some Ashkenazim. Most Ashkenazim, however, use neither celery nor parsley because there is uncertainty about what blessing to recite over them in Ashkenazi custom. They instead use boiled potatoes. Each family should continue to its own tradition.
What was our tradition at home? I believe it has something to do not only to do with the issue of what bracha to make on parsley, but also the fact that there weren't so much fresh vegetables in Europe in Pesach time, because it's been winter the whole winter, and there's not lots of fresh vegetables. And potatoes there's everywhere. Potatoes there's all the time. And in any case, my custom was we had boiled potatoes with a little twig of parsley. So we had parsley and potatoes. Okay, so everybody would get a little piece of boiled potato together with a sprig of parsley,
Partly the root or not the
No, just the leaves. Yeah, a little bit of the leaves. It doesn't matter, any part. The point is to have a vegetable. And what do you do with it? Go ahead. We dip the karpas in salt water.
in salt water or vinegar and recite the bracha of Bore Priha Adama. We create the food. Who creates the food of the soil with the intention that it also apply to the maror that will be eaten later in the meal. It is not necessary to recline while eating karpas because some poskim say it alludes to the suffering of enslavement in Egypt and therefore need not to be eaten as a demonstration of freedom. One must eat less than a kazait of karpas. Thought some Rishonim Rambam say they more than a kazait of karpas should be eaten. It is best to avoid this. Eating more than kazait invites uncertainty about making a bracha acharona, since according to Rishonim, bracha
Ri is one of the Rishonim. That was his name. Rabbi Yitzchak. It's an acronym.
Rabbi Yitzchak, okay.
Yeah.
A bracha acharona is necessary, but according to Rashbam, one should not recite a bracha acharona because the blessing over a karpas cover the maror we eat during the meal. Therefore, as said, it is best not to eat a kazait of karpas. If one eats more than a kazait of karpas, he should not recite a bracha acharona because we rule leniently whenever there is uncertainty about the reciting of bracha.
So when he said before that you do recite it, you should recite a bracha acharona, that's if you have fruit or anything else. But if it's just vegetables, since in your mind the bracha is going to continue to the maror, then we rule leniently. And that's usually what I say when I feed my family French fries throughout the Seder. That's karpas, right? Potatoes. Who said it has to be boiled? Let it be roasted. Let it be delicious. Yeah, maybe the tradition. You're right. It's a little bit of change for tradition, but it makes the children ask questions. And the truth is, as I was saying before, some people say like the Rambam, you can have more than a kazait. Maybe according to the Rambam, you should have a kazait of karpas. It's one of the ritual eatings. Any one of the ritual eatings, you have to have a proper measurement of it. But because of the suffix brachot, the common instructions in most Haggadot, it says have less than a kazait of the karpas, so that you don't get into the problem of the bracha achrona for the bar priadama that you made before you wash and have the meal. In any case, whether you have more than a kazait or less than a kazait, the idea of having the karpas first, it's really whets your appetite. Whets your appetite like an appetizer. It makes you even more hungry. But only more than that, the point is that it whets your appetite for understanding, for knowledge, for what's going on here. What are we doing? What are these strange rituals? And then what happens next? So you have the Seder plate. It has the food on it. There's matzahs on the Seder plate. And so you got the, you can imagine in the day you had a piece of meat. You had the big, nice roast of the Korban Pesach. And then you had another big, nice piece of roast from the Korban Chagiga. And then you had the salad. It was all there on the little small table, if you can imagine that, next to the cot that you're lying on. And on it you have some of course, the maror and the charoset, which is sweet. And then you have... yes, so you could smell it too. Of course, the smells, you could... you can even smell it now, right? And then you start taking some karpas. There's some celery there. But okay, we'll start off with some celery. You dip it in salt water, very nice. And then you know what happens next? You're going to see, and I'll show it to you in the Haggadah soon. Someone comes and takes away the food. Taking away the food? Wait, I'm just getting started here. Why are you taking away the food? I'm not finished eating. We talked about it. Now that you have to wait for it. And that ritual, taking away the table, nowadays we do the Seder plate because this table can't be moved. This table is not moving. So we move the Seder plate away. That's supposed to arouse questions. And that is the beginning of the Magid section, right? After Karpas, Kahadesh Urchatz, Karpas Yachatz. Before we start the Magid, there's one more thing. Then comes Magid. What's Yachatz? We have to, what did we say? We have to tell the story about the matzah. So we have to uncover the matzah and tell the story about the matzah. But we don't want to tell the story on a complete matzah. We want to tell the story on a broken matzah. Right.
Number 3, the middle.
Actually, the middle one. Yeah, number 2. Why the middle? Let's see. Let's read it inside. Page 234. Natan, you'll take it as very good. Lechem oni has 2 meanings, as we said. Right? Lechem oni, we have been saying all along, it's the bread that you talk about. She'onina lav dvarat. La'anot means to answer something, so you talk about it. But it also means the bread of the poor, and poor, they always leave over a little bit for later because they don't know if they're going to get their next meal. And so the broken piece of bread symbolizes poverty as well. Although the original meaning of the matzah is to commemorate the redemption.
Mm-hmm.
It's the bread. That's why we lean when we eat the matzah, because it's actually the bread of redemption. It's the bread we ate when we came out. So there's no greater symbol of the Exodus than this matzah, this special bread that we had. And it's, I think I mentioned to you maybe before, that it's a rejection of Egypt, because in Egypt, it's the cradle of baked goods of various kinds. This was an art which was developed in Egypt, apparently, historically. This is true. And therefore, a rejection of not having fancy bread, baguettes, and all different kinds of frena, and all different kinds of challah, all these kinds of baked, beautiful, croissants, pizza, all these kinds of that. We're rejecting all that. That's Egyptian. We're going to go with the simple flatbread, which we took with us into the Egypt. And of course, we didn't have time for it to rise as we left. So really, the meaning of the matzah is redemption, freedom, commemorative of the Exodus. But there's additional layers of meaning. Like we said, lechem oni could also mean bread of affliction. And especially could be the bread of the poor, because we have a broken bread. And it could also mean the bread that we speak about. So there's 4 different meanings of the matzah. At different times of the Seder, we point out different elements of this matzah. So let's go read it. Natan, you're on number 16 on page 234.
3 matzot are arranged on the Seder plate. After eating karpas, before reciting the Haggadah, the Seder leader and whoever else has 3 matzot in front of him breaks the middle matzah in half. 1 piece is saved for the Afrikaam, and the other is left between the 2 whole matzot. The reason for this is that the matzah alludes to a poverty and enslavement in Egypt, and is hence called lechem oni, poor man's bread. Paupers often eat partial loaves of bread because they are unable to buy whole loaves. So, in order to give expression to the poverty, we break the matzah in half. We do this before beginning the Haggadah, since the Haggadah should be recited in the presence of the matzah. This is because the term lechem oni also means bread of which we onim, answer, or say many things. And this means that the Haggadah must be recited while the matzah, in the form it will be eaten, is before us. This is why it must be broken in half before we begin the Haggadah. Nevertheless, our Seder night, just like on every Shabbat and Yom Tov, there is a mitzvah to recite Hamotze over 2 whole loaves of bread / matzah. Lechem Yeshua. Therefore, we set a table with 3 matzot. The middle one is broken in half to give the expression of lechem oni, while the top and bottom matzot remain whole and serve as lechem mishneh. Later, when reciting Hamotze, one should hold all 3 matzot so that there is lechem mishneh, and before reciting the bracha of al
Achilat matzah.
Achilat matzah. We put down the bottom matzah and recite the blessing over the top and middle matzah in order to highlight the broken matzah to a great degree. The danger piece, the larger piece of the broken matzah is designated as the Afrikaam, and the custom is to wrap it in a napkin. In recollection of the verse, the people took their dough before it was leavened. Their kneading leftover dough was wrapped in their robes. Some people have a custom to place the Afrikaam on their shoulder for a moment, in remembrance of the Exodus, when people carried matzot on their shoulders. Afterward, we had the Afrikaam to save it until the end of Seder, when it is eaten in the commemoration of the Pesach Korban. In many homes, the children customarily steal the Afrikaam and keep it until the end of the meal. When they give it back in return for a gift, this helps them stay awake for the entire Seder. In my family, we give gifts to all the children who remain awake until the Afrikaam is eaten.
What? They don't steal the afikoman in his house? They just give gifts to anybody, even if they don't steal. Maybe I'm sure. I'm not. I don't believe that. I'm sure the kids are gonna steal the afikoman. Anyways, you break the matzah, you wrap up the bigger portion, put it aside. Kids are always looking where you put it, because they're gonna try to grab it sometime. You've got an hour till you actually eat the meals, and 2 hours till you finish the meal, and then you start to look, where's my afikoman? I need that portion that's wrapped up. Oh no, the kids took it. Give it back. Pay up. It's not so. It's really uneducational to teach kids to steal. So we don't call it stealing the afikoman. We should really call it grabbing the afikoman. But people say this is the earliest childhood education to be a bargainer. They say that Jews are, always into business deals. So it starts. That's it. I want a new bike. Okay, I want that matzah. I want to finish the meal. I want to have the afikoman. It's a mitzvah, and you can't go on without eating the afikoman. And so he's got you over the hump. He's really in a good negotiating position. And if that's what you want the kid to be awake. That's the main thing. But it is much deeper than that. The afikoman is hidden away. It's representative of the. What are you going to say, Ariel?
That's hidden away.
What does it represent? Yeah, what does it represent? Why do we hide things away? And then the afikoman that we eat at the end of the meal, symbolic of perhaps the future.
The first reason is because when we came out of Egypt, we took the matzah and we put it under our robe.
Correct. No, that's true. Yeah, but hiding it though, that's wrapping it up. But hiding it is in most times it's interpreted that it's something. The future is hidden from us. The future we don't know, and the future is hidden, and Mashiach will come, and all sorts of things in store for us. Right?
Of course, something good will come out. Not of course, but is there?
It's a symbolic act, which is
much more than
tzafun hidden. Well, they say that the Geula started in Nisan and will happen again in Nisan. So this month has a lot in store for us. Maybe we're tapping into that the future redemption will be even greater than the redemption from the Exodus. You've seen the sea split. Haven't you been to the Universal Studios? You can see how they make the sea split. In America, that's where they made the movie. So they have a whole thing. I don't know how it's done, but anyways, our prophets tell us that the future redemption will be even greater miracles. Maybe there'll be some F-16s involved. Who knows? And 6 days of war, conquering 5 armies. But can you imagine such a miracle? I can't. That's too much. It's too much to fathom. That's perhaps as great a miracle as the splitting of the sea, maybe even greater. Jews gathering to the land of Israel after 2,000 years. Whew! Sounds pretty impressive to me. I can't imagine this would ever happen. Right? It's beyond us. And then when Mashiach comes and Beit HaMikdash is built, whew! It's hard to even dream of such things. We have to be like dreamers, right? That's the tzafun, that's the hidden. But we're not up to that yet. We're not up to eating the afikoman. We're just putting it away. The yachatz, we break the matzah, and we said why. We have to now, finally, now we have the stage is set. We're in the middle of drinking our 4 cups of wine. We're reclining. We are now ready to start with the good questions, because every story, every good lesson has to come with, as a response to questions. You've got to we've spurred the interest. We spurred the interest of the kids by doing strange things, by dipping and having salad and taking away the table. We're going to see, and so we're going to get started to telling the story. Now that the The table is set. The stage is set because you've broken the matzah and you've done the karpas and the dipping, and we're ready to get started. Okay? Somebody had a question or something. Yeah, please.
Let's say it says here like it specifies the larger piece and the smallest piece that you break from the middle matzah.
Yeah.
What if you break it and it turns into 3 pieces?
Oh, I hate when that.
You still have one large
I hate when that happens. Right.
And I've even had 4 pieces.
Oh my gosh. Oh.
And then you don't even know which one is larger. And there's 4 pieces. They're not the same
Yeah.
size.
That's why you should always have a ruler with you at the Seder to measure and see which piece is bigger. I'm joking. No, it's not that important. It's the idea. And you break it in 2. That's ideal. But sometimes matzah's crumbly and you don't really break it in 2. It comes many pieces, but that's all right. It's definitely even more like poor man's bread because they save maybe a few meals to have a few little pieces of bread. It's not super important at all. Yeah, to have 2 pieces instead of 3 or 4.
And you don't have to. Let's say you have the 3 pieces. Obviously, the 1/2 you bit, but that's Afrikaam.
The larger part,
the 2
yeah.
small pieces, you can still use that for the Seder.
Right, exactly. Why do we say that we keep the larger piece? That's what I was saying before. The idea is that the miracles of the future redemption are going to be larger than the miracles even of the Exodus, and it's a moment of hope. Yes, almost.
The larger piece of the Afrikaam, then we eat it all later. The whole.
Yeah, later on we eat the whole thing. There is a custom. It's a big obligation. Some people say that the actual mitzvah of eating matzah is fulfilled then at the end of the meal, because that's when it was originally eaten together with the Korban Pesach, which was eaten at the end of the meal. And we'll talk about that when we get to it. But that's a mitzvah to eat it, and you have to recline for it, as we were saying earlier. You have to recline when you're eating the first piece of matzah and when you're eating the afikoman. So that's actually a very important ritual eating of the matzah, the afikoman. And then we eat the whole thing. Yeah. Some people, there is a tiny custom. Some communities, it's not really written down in the books, but it's like a Hasidic custom that the matzah of the afikoman, it's a very special piece of bread. It symbolizes the future redemption. Matter of fact, any mitzvah is a precious thing. So some people, I won't call it superstitious, but it's like a superstition that you keep around a little crumb of the afikoman that brings you good luck. I wouldn't say good luck, gives you protection. And some people actually keep the afikoman from year to year. A little piece of the afikoman, they don't eat the whole thing. They leave a little bit over, and that's there is such a Hasidic custom. Yes, Rafid.
I'd like to go back to what he said when
Nathan. Nathan is his name. Nathan. Yes.
When you break it and you have more pieces, is it allowed to? Because we need this for the afikoman, and to hide it for the children, they need to look for them. Then they will have a present.
Yes.
Can you make more afikoman because of the children? Each one can look for someone.
That's an interesting question. If you divided it up, it's not going to be the bigger piece. But you could have a few afikomans for a lot of children. I liked in my family to foster unity among the children and let them all steal it together and all bargain for it to give it back together, and everybody gets their present no matter what. So breaking it up into many different pieces is a little bit untraditional because it wouldn't be the larger piece anymore. But not the end of the world. I can see that if you think that the kids are not getting along and they each want to steal their own little piece, you could do it that way. You could do it that way, and there's nothing really forbidden about that.
Because children sometimes they say, "Oh, I saw it the first."
We have to teach them to share. We have to teach them to share. So we don't have to give in to their childish behavior. We say, you want a present, you have to do it together. You have to, Anyways, all right. That's Yachatz. Kahadesh Urchatz Kaharpas Yachatz. Magid. Now, take a deep breath. Magid. We're going to talk about a lot next week. We're going to go through the actual Haggadah and see the Magid inside. But now we'll read some of the laws and some of the descriptions of the Magid and customs and then we'll see it inside the Haggadah next week. Let's start today, and we'll continue talking about the Magid tomorrow. Page 235, number 17, Magid Ravid. Can you read for us a little bit?
Okay. Magid. After breaking the middle matzah, we uncover the matzot, and the Seder leader lifts the entire Seder plate, or at least the matzot, for all of the participation to see. While doing so, he recites the paragraph Halama Anya and explains the meaning of the words of the participants. Upon completing the Halama Anya, the city leader places the city plate or matzot back on the table.
Okay, what's the halach manya? What's the halach manya? It's a little paragraph. You know the song. It's actually in Aramaic. Ha is this is. Ze. Lachma is lechem. Anya is oni. Lechem oni, like we said before. It's a translation of the verse, which we said, the matzah is the bread of affliction, the bread of oni, and many different interpretations. This is a translation of it into Aramaic. And it's a small little poem where we're pointing out to the children, hey, look, we're about to tell you a story about this bread. Right away, we start into the story, and it's the bread of affliction, bread of poverty. So already telling the story about the kids. Who's poor? There's richness everywhere around us. There's the finest clothing, and we have the finest dishes. We're all sitting around the beautiful table. What poverty are you talking about? Why are we taking out this poor? Where's the nice challahs that we're used to on every Friday night? Why do we have a little piece of matzah? So the first thing you do is explain this matzah, and there's a little section in there. We'll talk more about the content of halach ma'anya when we look at the Haggadah inside. Okay, we'll continue with the laws and the customs presently. So Ravid, go ahead. A little bit more.
Also a connection to the destroying of the second temple?
There is a connection, because we do speak there about the future redemption, that we one day will come back to Jerusalem and have the complete redemption. It's connected to the content of this poem. But we're looking at it pretty much at the structure right now, so we're going to keep skirt over we're not going to open up the halach ma'anya now. We're going to keep reading the Pninei Halacha.
Okay. At this point, the Seder plate is removed, making it appear as if the Seder is over. This is done so that the children become surprised and ask why the matzot in the Seder plate are being taken away before we have even begun eating. Consequently, they ask, Ma nishtana? After removing the Seder plate and even before reciting Ma nishtana, we pour the second cup. This also surprised the children, because we do not usually pour 2 cups of wine before a meal. Another reason we do this is that we want the whole Haggadah, including the question that preceded, to be said over a cup of wine.
Okay, so as we said, you have to have the full cup of wine before we go ahead, and so the halach manya is just like a short intro to the Magid, and then before we actually start the Magid, we pour the wine, and we take away the matzah, and that spurs the kids to ask. But before they ask, we have to have a cup of wine there, because the asking is part of the telling of the story. Okay, Ariel, take it over in page 236, please. It is best not to pour the wine.
It is best not to pour wine into the cups of the young children at this point, because they will have a hard time making it through the long Haggadah without spilling the cup.
That's a tip that he made up. It's interesting. Never heard of that before. The kids want to have their cup poured like everybody else, but all right. It's a nice tip. You don't want to ruin the tablecloth. Go ahead.
Well, wine spilled on the table can cause aggravation and demonstrates disrespect for Yom Tov, which should be honored with a clean tablecloth and a beautifully set table. Therefore, it is best to pour wine for the children near the end of the Haggadah.
I guess it depends on the age of the children. All right. Leave it at that. I don't have to fight against Rav Melamed. It's a nice tip if it's like 3-year-olds, but if, The 10-year-olds are going to want to know, have their own cup pour too.
Yeah.
Okay, anyways, go ahead.
The 3-year-olds, they don't understand anyways.
Right.
Really, they don't.
That's right. That's right. After the second cup has been poured, the children asked, Manishtana, go ahead.
After the second cup has been poured, the children ask, Ma nishtana. Following this, the Seder plate is returned so that the Haggadah can be recited in the presence of Matzah and Maror, and we begin answering the children with the story of the Exodus. We have already seen, chapter 15, that the purpose of the Seder night is to fulfill the mitzvah of narrating the Exodus, and that the essence of this mitzvah is to tell the story to the children. We also saw that there is a Torah commandment to tell the story of the Exodus even when no children are present, and that there is a mitzvah to begin the story with a question. We also learned that the story must be tailored to the ability and understanding of each child, and that when telling the story, one must begin with indignity and end with praise. We also saw that the purpose of the Seder is that the children learn, by means of the Exodus story, about the mission of the Jewish people in this world, to adhere to God, uphold His mitzvot, live in the land that He swore to give to our ancestors and to us, to enumerate His praises among the nations, and to earn divine blessing and goodness. The sages introduced a fixed text for the Haggadah, so people would relate the story of the Exodus with precision and without omitting any important elements. Additionally, it is commendable to continue telling the story after the Seder ends. However, during the recitation of the Haggadah, one must take care not to make things too tiresome and long-winded for the children and other participants. Reciting the text is sufficient to fulfill the mitzvah in the optimal manner.
I'll just add, and it's long enough. Right. But by all means, you have to personalize it. You have to make sure that you understand what you're reading and that you're actually, the message is coming across. All those messages he mentioned, that's our goal. Yeah.
Can you use, of course, the same story, but when you have very little children, they can concentrate all the time. Also, they don't understand all the words we use. You can say it in a childless way.
You must. You should, and you must.
Pictures.
And you use pictures, use puppets, use whatever you need to use, and say it in your own words.
Okay.
The custom usually is, and then once the little children have got their story, you give them some toy to play with, and then the adults recite the official text themselves, so that they tell the story with the precision that was developed over the years with all the different elements. So yeah, we have to. It's very hard. Some people look at me and they say, "You've got a hard job teaching. You've got, how old are you, Ariel?
19.
19-year-old. And how old are you, Rafid?
6.
6. How can you have a 19-year-old and a 6-year-old in the same class? It's very hard. There's all sorts of ages, and I say, it's no different than the Seder. At the Seder, that's everybody has this challenge. You're supposed to be telling a story, giving shiur, giving a lesson, and relating something, and the audience is always varied. It's always different ages and different languages sometimes, and it's a challenge. But we have to be up to the challenge. That's our mitzvah. It's our mitzvah to be able to go and to give each one something on their level. Yes, Amos.
Is there any book for the kids that they can have it on the table while we talk about
Many, yes. I'll bring in some that I have, and there's some here as well, and some have children's, illustrations which are designed for children, all sorts of things. Yes, many such. Small ones, for sure. Yeah, with pictures of children, pictures by children, pictures appropriate for children, all sorts. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Good. Okay, another question? No? Okay, let's try one more. Page 237, Ariel, you're still on.
All right. 18. Laws of Reciting the Haggadah. One who merely contemplates the Haggadah does not fulfill the obligation to tell the Exodus story, as it is stated, tell your child. Express the story verbally. However, it is not necessary for all participants to recite the Haggadah. The main thing is that the Seder leader or someone else recites it aloud, and the others hear it. Indeed, it was customary for the oldest participant
to read and explain the Haggadah while everyone else listens. This is, in fact, the way stories are usually told. Nowadays, in order to include everyone in the recitation of the Haggadah, it is customary for the Seder leader to read it aloud while everyone else quietly reads along with him. Others have participants take turns reading paragraphs from the Haggadah, but it is important to note that only a reader who has reached halachic adulthood, is a bar or bat mitzvah, can fulfill this obligation on another's behalf. When several sets of parents and children have the Seder together, it is not necessary for each father to tell the story to his child separately. It is sufficient for the Seder leader or another participant to read the Haggadah out loud, because as long as a father makes sure that his child hears the story of the Exodus, he has fulfilled the mitzvah to tell your child. One who wishes to enhance the mitzvah can further explain the Exodus to his child. In order to fulfill the mitzvah of telling the Exodus story, one must at the very least explain or hear an explanation of the Pesach Korban, matzah and maror. This makes clear that we were slaves in Egypt and that God redeemed us. Therefore, if parents see that their children are tired and are unable to complete the Haggadah, they must tell them about the Korban Pesach, matzah and maror, and explain their meaning. The same principle applies to a participant who was unable to complete the Haggadah due to illness or military duty.
I'm just thinking that we might have at the Seder my 84-year-old mother, Zrat Hashem, and she usually goes to sleep quite early. And the way they were changing the clocks on Thursday night, going ahead an hour. So that means we're not going to be starting the Seder at 6:30, but more like 7:30, or even 8 o'clock, depends on how long the shul goes on. And so it's already past her bedtime. Okay, so we have Kiddush, Kadesh, Urchatz, Karpas, Yachatz. When we finally get to the Magid, it'll be 9:30. Whew, way past her bedtime.
Oh, right, but that's kind of.
But she's a responsible adult. She's past bat mitzvah. She has to do all the mitzvot. So maybe we'll have a short summary, explain the Pesach, Matzah, and Maror, those the critical parts of the Haggadah. Then she can have a quick early meal before everybody else. Wash her hands, have the matzah, make sure she leans, and then she can go to sleep. So
Could
many
you have a break?
You could have a break, but why are you suggesting a break? I don't understand. What's the break going to help?
Help her make her sleep, and then she wakes up and you continue.
Because
It might be 2 in the morning, but still. Could you do that?
Well, not so good. You really should be done before midnight, but we'll get to that.
Okay.
It's complicated to make a break for too long, but it does happen. Somebody nods off, needs a little nap. There's laws about that because the bracha is part of a continuum. The Seder goes, it's the 15 stages, has to flow together. But in any case, sometimes you do speed things up, and you have to know what's critical, what can be skipped, what can't be skipped, just because otherwise they won't do the mitzvah. They won't hear about the Pesach Matzah Maror. They won't eat the matzah, mitzvah d'oraita. And, okay, you have to have your mother's matzah ball soup. Okay, that's not a mitzvah, but that's delicious. You have to have the food, and then all the stages should be done. So sometimes you would really need somebody is on duty, military duty. You have a very quick Seder, and you can't read every word, so you have to know how to shorten it, which parts can be left out, which not. Yeah,
It's important to hear all the words of the Magi.
ideally, yes, ideally that's what you should
I
do.
ask this because sometimes people like to go to the bathroom,
Right?
and this is why I ask, can you have a break?
It's a good question. And so if you do, ideally everybody should wait. Someone leaves, wait for them to come back, and then you proceed. And if they didn't wait for you, you've got to catch up. You should be reading the Haggadah to catch up with everybody else. Because to tell the story with precision, the way our sages and the tradition mandates, we should have all the elements of the Haggadah. And you have to be sensitive, because there's always somebody else that needs to go to the bathroom. If you have a large crowd, you're going to have breaks. And that's okay. You can be discussing more the themes before you proceed to the next theme.
But it's okay. To do
Outside, yes, of course, absolutely.
that. Thank you.
It's probably usually necessary. Okay, we'll stop here, and we're going to continue with some customs tomorrow on page 237. Okay, thank you.
It's a really cool